Tips for the times. Hope you are all safe and well. Today I'd like to go over concept and both backed by science and our spiritual teachers that essentially says that we are all connected to all of humanity and all of the universe. And I'd like to refer to a experiment that I read about years ago about plants that were grazed together in the greenhouse, and then one was put in New York, the other in Paris. And they put electrosensors on their leaves, and basically when they cut the leaf in the the plant in New York, the electrosensors of the plant in Paris just went nuts, and basically validating that there was this connection between the plants, and no time was involved. It was just instant. So it's interesting to look at the quantum physics folks. They're talking about now, talking about what's called entanglements, which essentially means that two electrons anywhere in space, billions of miles away, can react instantly to each other. So that's an interesting concept. And a lot of the spiritual teachers tell us that we are one, the other person is you. And I always like to refer to Einstein, which great scientist, and also kind of an open mind to the concept of spirituality. Basically, his beautiful quote is, "We are all part of a universe. We've decided to separate ourselves from that. We choose to be in kind of what he calls an optical delusion of consciousness," which I think is a great term. Optical delusion of consciousness, which keeps us in a prison of being separate. And he very eloquently says, "Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty." That's beautiful. Expand our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. And being more focused on science, the scientists say that we are stardust, which is kind of a cool concept. And how they come to that conclusion is they measure light coming from the stars, and there's a way of measuring the wavelengths of those starlight. And essentially we are the building blocks essentially of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. And they can measure in the light coming from stars each element: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, oxygen. They actually have a spectrum of color that they emit, and so they can see how whatever's out there in the galaxies billions of miles away are the same particles that are in here in our bodies, the same building blocks. And I always like to focus on some interesting quotes that sort of confirm that. And one is by William James. He says, "We are like islands in the sea, separate on the surface, but connected in the deep." And the consciousness of that is something we obviously need now. And another, linking both spirit and quantum physics, Nietzsche says we are kind of connected by an invisible thread. Those invisible threads are our strongest ties. And even in quantum physics, they call that, they talk about the string theory. So to me, there's evidence enough to know that we are connected. We are linked in every molecule and atom of our body to the entirety. And that's why I like this beautiful piece of art from an Italian artist, that connects our bodies with the energy of the universe. And, the other inspiration to me is Joni Mitchell in her song in Woodstock, the album Woodstock, or the song Woodstock, saying, "We are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden." And to me, that garden, getting back to the garden, is compassion, kindness, tolerance, justice, freedom. So, sending you blessings and love, and that you're all well and safe, and we'll see you next time for Tips for the Times. Satnam.